here today to show you how to do free motion embroidery or free machine embroidery. Now you're probably used to a sewing machine set up for regular sewing, which I've got it here. It's got a regular foot on and these teeth. So what I'm going to do today is talk you through the machine right back to basics, because I think once you understand your machine, we can then move on to stitches and you will have the confidence to do this in any of your projects. Now we've got a regular foot on here. So the first thing we need to do is take that off, and you'll see these teeth. Now when we do ordinary sewing, those teeth work with that foot to push the fabric through. That controls the speed of the fabric and the length of your stitch. Now what we're doing is disengaging that, and that's the only difference between normal sewing and free machining. Nothing to be frightened of. First thing we have to do is disengage these or lower them. Now on my machine, it's a button on the side. You probably saw them go down. On some machines there's a lever at the front, and on some machines there's a lever at the back. You need to look in your handbook for your machine to see how you lower the feed dogs. On some very old machines you can't do that, and we have a darning plate that covers this stitch plate, and so those feet are covered up. Once you've done that, we then put on a special embroidery foot. And the difference with this foot and the regular foot is it's on a spring. Sometimes it's called a darning foot, but it's the same thing. The idea of the spring is that it just hits the fabric when the needle goes in, so it's not stopping the movement, so you have that complete freedom of movement. So that's your machine set up for free machining. That's the only difference. We do have tension dials as well, and so most machines are at the top somewhere, and they're numbered with usually from about 1 up to 9 or 10. Normal tension for the top thread is about number 4 or 5, and on my machine it has a little red dial. On most machines it has an area where it's on normal. For free machining we take that down a little bit, but once I start showing you the stitches you'll understand why. And apart from that, everything's fine. Now, but before we get started, there are 1 or 2 other little things to know about the machine. Cleaning it. Now, I sometimes teach classes and people have never cleaned their machines because they don't know they have to do it. When we do free machining, you get a lot of fibres and threads come off. So we need to take off this stitch plate. Again, mine lifts up. Sometimes it's a screw to take it off. You need to look in your handbook and that will show you how to remove that. I'm just going to press that here. Now you will see there's a lot of fluff and muck in there. Can you see? Mm-hmm. Because I've been very bad and not cleaned it this week. We really should clean machines every 5 or 6 hours of use. So I'm just going to brush it out. I'm not going to blow it, because if I blow it, it'll push it back in. So it just clean out that fluff. Now I can't get to some of it because some of it's down here in the bobbin race. So I'm also going to take all that apart. And there's no need to worry that you won't get it back in again, because you will. We just give that a bit of a brush there. And you see I've got all sorts of threads coming out now. So that's the first thing we really need to do, is make sure your machines are nice and clean. I'm now going to put this back in, for which I have to get down here where I can see what I'm doing. Possibly, excuse me. Put that back and we're all set to run. The other little thing we need is obviously our other equipment we need to think about, and needles are something quite important as well. I think probably I'm just as guilty as most people, but we only ever change our needles when they break. You think, oh, there's a problem and it breaks and we change them. Again, we should really change them regularly. And ideally, if you're working on a project and you're changing a thread, that's when you should change your needle. So if I've spent 4 or 5 hours using a metallic thread, that thread will rub a groove in the needle. It makes its own mark, as it were. So then if I change to a different thread, like a cotton, that won't sit in that mark that the metallic thread has made, and that rubs it. So one of the biggest problems you often get with free machining is thread shredding and breaking. And that usually is you need a new needle. It's that simple. So we'd need fresh needle. I actually buy them in boxes of 100 because then you're not precious about them. It's quite happy to change them all the time. I use a universal 90. 90 is the size and universal is the type of needle. It used to be a size 14. I tend to use nothing else other than that. You can buy specialist needles and you can pay a lot of money for lots of different types of needles, and some people prefer to use them, but I find that works for me. If I have a problem, I might go up and take a size 100, that's all. So that's needles. The other thing, fabrics and threads. Right, now you'll see here, I've got a basket full of different types of threads. You can use any thread for designed for the machine, for machine embroidery, but it's so nice to have some of these really special shiny ones. The one that I probably use most of all is a rayon thread. I don't use any particular make. I've got lots of different makes here. The one thing I will say is you get what you pay for with your threads. Threads can seem quite expensive, but it's worth paying more because you get a better quality thread. So these are rayons and they've got a lovely shine to them. They're not twisted as much as your regular sewing threads. There are also some beautiful metallics with lovely sparkle. Some are easier to use than others, but once we get sewing, I'll talk about that and how we can make it easier. Shiny threads. You can even get threads like this, wool, which gives a nice matte texture. So again, lots of different variety with our threads. And then fabrics. What can we stitch into fabrics? Now, if you've only done dressmaking or perhaps made curtains, you'll just think it's like cottons and things like that. And we can stitch into cottons and silk, lovely. But also we can stitch into velvets. We can do free machining on velvet. We can use felt. This is free machining on felt. Paper. We'll do a bit of paper later. So quite easy. And metal as well. We can stitch into metal quite easily, just with this needle, and that's all. So now you know all about your machine and needles, your fabrics and your threads. We're now going to move on and I'm going to show you how to stitch.